let's get started. Thank you very much for being here. This is a follow-up to the previous session when we started talking about growth and success in academia. Today we're going to specifically focus on exponential growth and life-changing habits, and there will be hands-on exercises that it would be great for you to do. So again, the key questions we're going to try to address today are how to witness and what does it even mean to have exponential growth, and what are three key life-changing habits that we can develop. So what does it mean to be multidimensional? And in fact, we talked about this. We had this slide last time, so I elaborated it that unlike the sort of thing we were being told decades ago, that it's good to just stand tall and therefore only be focusing on one very narrow specific area, it's good to stand wide in order to stand tall. We talked about this. And we talked about that ultimately it really means being where you are at any moment, giving it all at this very moment. So this is actually one of the key things to exponential growth in itself. Like there is a associated truly being open at any given moment. So this is not just openness in the sense of, okay, I'm going to be open to you, be nice to you. No, it's about openness to yourself and to growth at any given moment. And you're going to hear about this. And so therefore, it's not just about this or that. It's everywhere at all times growing. So the NBA, the Basketball Association, recently announced the most valuable player, this Canadian player, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, known as SGA also. And I was listening to his talk, and he said something that really stood out. He said, I don't think there's enough emphasis on how much off the court, meaning what you do away from the basketball court, influences on the court. And once I became better off the court, my career started to skyrocket. It's no coincidence, right? So this idea that who you are and what you do at all times, not just at work, but at home and in any gathering and constantly, because you're the same person. And if you're growing off the court, things are going to happen for you on the court. So paying attention to that. And I think that's one of the key contributors to exponential growth in your career. I was talking to one of my colleagues the other day, and Carlos was saying, Armand, do you know what's the difference between ordinary and extraordinary? I said, no. He said, the difference is the extra. I said, okay, what does that mean? So we started talking about that, but ultimately it led me to a deep place, because it's the extra every day, week and month. And it's not necessarily too much extra. It's a little extra, but at every moment, every day, week, month. Of course, we all have lapses and we're all doing things that we all have our ups and downs. But the idea that constantly, consistently, you're giving it that extra, right? In fact, there's this thing known as the law of exponential growth. And it kind of ultimately is about short-term versus long-term. There's this saying attributed to Bill Gates. And so we always underestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years. Some people say 1 year, but underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. If I tell you, set certain goals for the next year, or what can you achieve in the next year, you will probably overestimate what you can achieve. But nearly everybody will underestimate what they can achieve in the next 10 years, what they can achieve in the next 10 years. And so ultimately, this is the law of exponential growth. And so great, for example, technological revolutions in a span of a decade, you've experienced some of them yourself, right? They might be unfolding slowly, but consistently, but exponentially. And so 10 years from now, you may not recognize 10 years from now in the sense of a technological revolution. Well, as you will probably recognize 1 year from now. But what I want to emphasize is that this is so true for individual growth as well. So what I want to emphasize is I've thought about the exponent. I don't like to simplify life to some mathematical function. But I'm going to make an exception today. And the exponential function, y equals e to the power of t, is this strange function. The more I think about it, I was spending a lot of time thinking about it last night, and I've been thinking about it for quite a while now. I realize how hard it is to believe it, to understand it, to fathom it, or to even appreciate it. It's a very, very strange function. And people have said that the human mind is not capable of understanding exponential growth. We don't really understand it. It's extremely weird and strange and bizarre and interesting. First of all, notice that if you're having linear growth in your career versus exponential growth, first of all, at earlier times, you might be seeing others that are growing faster than you, right? And in fact, you might be feeling stagnated in a part of your career. I've certainly felt that too, right? And especially in retrospect. But things might be, if you're doing things the right way, and if you're this open person that is constantly open to growth, things are happening here in the background for you without you even knowing it. So the early times appear very flat compared to later times. I'm just going to give you an example. Imagine that you're this person who can grow 4% every month for 10 years. Now, if you say 4% compared to the first month, so you have 10 years ahead of you, that's 120 months ahead of you. And you're just going to say, I'm going to contribute 4% every month. 4% meaning, for example, I'm going to publish, to do work, to create code, to contribute to my field, etc., at about 4% every month, okay? If it's compared to the first month, what you start with, then we're talking about, okay, you're making 120 months of contributions, each 4% of compared to the one. Let's say the number one is your starting point. You're gonna basically 10 years from now, you're gonna be at about 5-6 times higher than where you started in terms of your contributions, your growth, right? So that's about a 500% growth. Okay, it's not bad. 10 years from now, you would be 5 times more, 500% more successful. Now, again, success is a relative term. It could be outward things, it could be inward things, your growth, character, etc. But if the 4% is not compared to the first month, but compared to the last month, every month you're growing 4% compared to the last month. So that's a spirit of openness, that you're growing with respect to who you are now, not who you were 2 years ago, that you set your mind to that. Then we're multiplying, we're not adding, we're multiplying every month by 1.04. And suddenly this brings you to this number 110, which is magnificently larger than this here. So in 10 years from now, you could have an impact that's 100 times more than it was 10 years before it when you started, right? And so 11,000%, nearly 11,000% growth versus 500% growth. And these numbers are not like, these numbers are meaningful. This can really happen. If you have that, and so exponential growth is about being open every month to that month, not to the first month. Predefining your career now and saying, okay, you know what, my career is just doing this. No, it's constantly being open. You could, okay, somebody might challenge that and say, you know what, I'm going to change my function. I'm going to say, okay, first month I'll do 4% growth. Second month I'll do 5%. Third month I'll do 6%. But it's all with respect to the first month. If you do that, you arrive at a polynomial growth. But turns out that even that is not as good as exponential growth. Because even if you're growing the amount or growing the percentage by which you're growing every month increases, but it's with respect to the first month. So ultimately you arrive at a polynomial. But an exponential always, at some point beyond a certain time, exceeds that. So it's a mind-blowing thing. And even if this exponent is like a million, like your impact is time to the power of 1,000,000, there's going to be a time beyond which, right, exponential growth exceeds that. So exponential function is this very strange function that if you take any of its derivatives, even 10, 100, the 100th derivative, 200th, 1 billionth derivative, all the derivatives keep increasing with time. It's this very strange thing that everything is working together towards a kind of a growth that the human mind cannot understand. And what it really comes down to is simply this word. You are growing consistently with respect to the last month or the last week or the last day. You're open to who you are now, not to who you were 2 years ago or 10 years ago. And you're constantly expanding with respect to who you are now today. So that brings me to this sort of a plot. We often think of ourselves, summarize ourselves as one-dimensional people. It's like, how high is my IQ? I wish I was smarter than this person. Or how much of a specific skill do I have? Or how much focus do I have on this particular project? And we plot ourselves here. Or me as a lab manager and PI, I may look at someone and summarize them like this. Right? How successful are you? But that's not true. The human being is not one-dimensional. We are at least two-dimensional. In fact, we're multidimensional. We're many dimensional. But at least let's move from one dimension to two dimensions and think of yourself that way. So how much of a growth mindset do you have? Remember that exponential growth? How much of a growth mindset do you have? How much of a fit to the culture of the environment, of the academic environment, the work environment that you are, do you have? How much are you able to dance? Ultimately, fitting well in an environment ecosystem is about your ability to dance with the people around you. And dancing is a spirit of openness. If a person moves towards you, you might move back. I have a spiritual mentor. He tells me that ultimately spiritual growth and growth in any way is an act of dancing with another entity, with reality, with truth, with people around you. It comes towards you, you kind of move with it. And sometimes you move towards it, it moves with you. So you could say instead of IQ, thinking about EQ, other kinds of sort of intelligence, not just the sort of a narrow IQ definition of intelligence, but emotional aspects. And ultimately, it's really character, right? So if you are a person here, or if somebody is here, that's not a very good place to be. I've seen people being here and even being up here, having extremely high IQ, but very low ability growth mindset and the ability to dance and to grow and to understand what's going around them. And they don't even know what they're doing to themselves and to the people around you. They move the entire lab in weird places and they don't know what they're doing with what they're doing. And terrible things happen. So if I ever feel a person is here, even if their IQ is off the charts, even if they're here, I don't recruit them to my lab, because this person could be very, very detrimental to themselves and to the people around them. Now, of course, we kind of prefer if somebody's here. We certainly don't want to recruit somebody if they're here, and we would love to find someone who's here. But what if somebody is here? If somebody is here, I would by all means prefer to hire this person than this person. Because this person has that growth mindset, right? So and if they're able to dance and to move and to learn and to adapt, there's hope that they will move in this direction. Whereas a person here, I don't know if they will move in this direction, right? But the person like this can move in this direction. They could continue to grow and they could continue to gain the skills that they need. And ultimately, even things like IQ are ultimately learned, they come after a lot of practice and awareness. That's why people's IQ over time increases, like generations. Today's IQ tests, people do better than they did 10 years ago on average. So I would say if somebody's below this point, I would not be hiring them to our lab if I can assess them. That's a big part of our interviews when we do that. But here, I would say that the threshold is lower. You still want someone to have certain skills. If you hire someone that's here that has very, very low skills, that's not a good idea either, because ultimately this person, even if they have a great character, but if they're very, very low on skills that you want, once they enter the work environment, they might feel inferior to others. They might not have the skills, ultimately the minimal skills to grow, and it could be quite detrimental to themselves and others too. So you do want someone to have certain good skills, but it doesn't have to be off the charts. And so I kind of like to think of it this way, right? And then so you want to recruit people to your own work environment. And also if you're being hired and interviewing to enter other labs, you really want to know that you are here somewhere on this chart, and you want to be able to convey that to others. The problem is that ultimately when a person is here, they don't even know they're here. That's the ultimate problem with being a blind spot. Many people who are here or wherever, low on this y-axis, they don't know that they're here. And so that's the problem of having blind spots. And as a human being, we all have that. We all have our blind spots. And I don't have any recommendations about how to deal with blind spots, because by definition, you don't know. It's an unknown. You don't know. It's an unknown flaw that you have. You don't know that you're missing, if something is missing. And that's why it's so important to have mentors and friends who are able to tell you your issues, and ultimately making sure that you have people around you. You're surrounding yourself with people that are going to tell you when something is when something is going on.
I have a couple of questions here regarding what we just discussed. So just having that growth mindset, I have some, I think I've been like this for the past, I don't know, like 20 years in my life. That I wanted to always grow the next day compared to the previous day, and many areas in my life I have achieved that exponential growth. But at some point I started to feel overwhelmed. I'm not sure if I'm getting old and it's because of that, or it's I don't know, I'm getting almost to my 40s, so maybe I'm starting to think different aspects. So how do you deal with that? Like the pressure that we put on ourselves to grow always compared to our previous day or previous month, that at some point might be too much, added to all the different aspects of our lives. So how do you
I think no, I get the question. I think the beauty of I think the point is exponential growth is a consequence of something. It's not something you necessarily directly plan on. It's a consequence of the growth mindset and the openness mindset, and not being stuck on one single path mindset, and the ability. So as I was trying to imply, sometimes things are happening, and in fact, always things are happening for you in the background. You might actually experience a lot of loss while you're going through it. For example, your grants might be rejected, you might lose your job, you might have personal problems, you might have serious health problems, you might be very unhappy with what's happening at work with you, with your personal life, you might be going through a breakup, or all kinds of things, right? But I think the point is that these things themselves are making things happen for you. I was actually, last night I was talking to a group of people. I was looking at this mystical Persian writer. His name is Ruzbahan Bagli. He was a kind of a very deep thinker, and he was talking about how he says, I really wish that people knew that in the depths of darkness there is light, and in the depths of falling down you're actually standing up. So how you deal with these difficulties and losses, right? He says, I wish people knew that when they're losing, they're actually gaining, because in those moments, he's a spiritual thinker, and he's talking about that moment, the truth, reality, God, whatever you want to call it, is there, and you just have to get it. And so as you're going through losses, you're gaining, and we have to understand that. So for example, again, as I look at my earlier career, I feel like if I look at my growth, it's very slow compared to my growth now. But I know that my growth now is because of what was happening back then. For example, in my own case, just one example, as I was minding my own business, trying to do the right things, necessarily not playing games and and manipulating other people, good things were happening. I was gaining the trust of the people. And ultimately people came back to me later in my career and said, Arman, can you run this session? Can you organize this event? Can you be the chair of these things? People ended up coming after me, asking me to lead them, right? And I often tell people that great leadership sometimes happens, and some of the best signs of leadership is when other people come after you and they ask you to lead them. That doesn't mean you shouldn't step up and volunteer to lead. That's okay. But really, the most beautiful ones are the ones when people come after you. And you don't know when that's going to happen. But as you're dealing with these adversities and difficulties, things are happening for you in the background. So I don't know how helpful or useful that is.
It was very well answered. It was exactly what I
Okay.
needed to understand the situation. Thank you
Okay.
for your response.
Thank
The
you.
second question, I think it could benefit those who are looking for their next position. You actually showed us that chart of who you would like to hire, the
Mm-hmm.
one that
Mm-hmm.
fits culturally and also has a bit of a skill. How do you judge that practically? I know that it's your secret sauce of interviews, probably, but if you could just share that with us. Like, let's assume that I come to your interview to apply for a postdoc position, for example. How do you judge? How do you
Yeah, yeah.
what? That's exactly what.
Yeah, I mean it's I'm gonna share again. Yeah, you're right. I mean, ultimately these things, we arrive at after a lot of thinking, etc. Ultimately it's very hard. In fact, it's easier to evaluate someone here than it's evaluate someone here. I mean, people marry someone that they think they know for, and they've known for quite a while, and then it doesn't work out. How do you truly evaluate somebody's a character, not just personality, character, and ultimately, so I think a lot of it also comes down to, part of it is just the kind of questions that you ask them, but also a good part of it is also looking at their references and going deeper into that and actually having phone calls and conversations with the references, not just looking at people's reference letters. Because reference letters are usually written by the applicant themselves. They're just doing it for others, and they just do a few refinements and they send it to you. So you almost never get a reference letter that's weak, because if it was going to be weak, the person wouldn't have asked them. It's very rare to see a reference letter that's weak. So reference letters are always strong. The question is this strong or is this super strong? And is there a voice of the supervisor coming through this? That's not just, even when I write reference letters for other people, I tell them, listen, help me with the draft, because many, many people ask me to write reference letters for them. I only write it for them when I can evaluate them, but I sometimes get help from them to write it. But then I try to add my own specific angles to it. So hopefully your reference letters are writing that, but also I'll be talking to them. I'll be going back and forth with them, whether through email or a phone call, to really try to understand your character. And another way, of course, is, and this is the best way, but the rare way, is to actually have worked with that person and to interacted with that person, given them a project and sort of evaluated them that way.
Got it.
It's hard.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let's move on. Thank you for those questions. So I want to now move on to developing life-changing habits. And so last time we showed a number of books. I think that we showed the first three already. I talked about them. Seven Habits is a book that I do tend to recommend quite a bit. It was written quite a while ago, over 25 years ago, but I think it's a great book. You could stay with it, and there's audiobooks on it too. And some of these habits we'll actually refer to today. Here's another book that I do recommend people take a look at. It's a very good take on the concept of time management. And so 4,000 weeks, surprisingly, is how long a person lives. You might be surprised by that. You're like, oh, I thought we live 100,000 weeks. No, we live 4,000 weeks if we live 80 years. If you live 9 or 100 years, then that's like 5,000 weeks. But we have short time on this earth, right? And so this book makes the argument that in the modern times, we have the concept of time management totally wrong. We're missing what time even means or time management is. So I highly recommend people take a look at this book. It's a very good book. It stays with you, and you may not get very, very specific instructions, but it opens your eyes up, and that's sometimes better than any instruction, because the instructions then can come from within you. So I recommend that. I'm going to start with I'm going to talk about 3 habits today. So habit 1 is this life-changing habit of being proactive. So here's one of my favorite writers, Henry David Thoreau, lived about 150 years ago in New England. New England is northeast US, because the English people, when they migrated to America, that's where they landed, and that was their New England. And so he was in Massachusetts, and he also has a famous book called Walden, and he goes in this forest. He lives at the edge of it for a year and a half, 2 years, and he reflects about life. Very, very good book. But he has this saying that I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man, or the human being, to elevate his or her life by conscious endeavor. Nothing excites me more than the ability of the human being to elevate his or her life by a conscious endeavor. So the idea of being proactive. And often I can catch people by just listening to them, whether they're proactive or reactive. So reactive language is things like, there's nothing I can do. That's just the way I am. That's just the way things are. My supervisor makes me so mad. They won't let that. That's not possible. That cannot be done. I can't. Whereas proactive language is, hey, let's look at the alternatives. I control my own feelings, or I'm not my feelings. They're just messengers to me. They don't define me. They come and go. I can create a great presentation. I choose to give an appropriate response. So very different sort of, even verbally, you'll see it in different people. There's a funny poem by Rumi, the famous mystic and Sufi. So what he has this funny story where he walks into this. There's this man. He walks into this garden, and he sees somebody in his garden on top of a tree, and he says, "What are you doing there?" He says, "I'm enjoying the fruits on your tree." He says, "You're not allowed to be there." He says, nothing is in our hands. It was all predestined for us to be at this point at this time. It was predestined for me to be on top of your tree, eating your tree right now. So the man smiles, and he has a servant with him. He says, "Sure, bring this person down." And he brings him down. And he says, "Okay, why don't you tie him around the tree, and why don't you beat him up?" And then as the servant starts to beat him up, the man starts to cry and says, why are you doing this to me? And then the owner of the garden, he smiles and he says, "It's not me doing it. It was predestined for me to be here at this moment, to be beating you up right now." And at that moment, the man who's been beaten up, he says, I repent, I repent, I repent. It's free will, it's free will, it's free will. It's a beautiful poem in Persian. So what happens is that I've seen this, I see this routinely. People who think that they cannot do anything in this world, they cannot even control themselves and the people around them, or how they behave to the people around them, they will be beaten up in life, because all they do is focus on conspiracy theories and focus on how we cannot control anything around us and how everything is written down by the powers that be, and there's nothing we can do about it. So I think that's very important. And there's a difference between a circle of concern and a circle of influence. So circle of concern is all things that worry you, all things that you care about, all things that concern you. It could be politics of the day. It could be what's happening on south of the border, north of the border, east, west, anywhere in the world, this president, that whatever, prime minister, all these things. But circle of influence are things that you can actually do something about. Like, an individual cannot really do much when it comes to a lot of the stuff in their circle of concern. But circle of influence is things that you can influence. So the point is that when people focus too much and a lot on their circle of concern, the news of the day, what's happening in the world, all these things, except if those things inspire them to be a better version of themselves. And sometimes that happens. But if it's all about just being, and we live in a day where the news is not week by week, it's minute by minute, and bad news is often minute by minute, right? So, and we hear a lot more of it than we used to. It's easy to just lose hope. And what happens is that when you focus too much on that circle of concern, your circle of influence shrinks. You don't end up doing anything. Whereas if you focus on the circle of influence, the things that you can influence, then actually your circle of influence grows. And so sometimes you have a person who not only ends up impacting themselves, but the people around them and the environment around them, and bigger and bigger and bigger, possibly even at the sort of a very large scale. And some monumental people were like that. So here's an exercise I want people to do. And I've done this myself tens of times, and it's always surprising when you do it. And just so grab a piece of paper, and so basically write down 2 to 3 things that you can do, which you aren't doing enough of, that if you did, would make a tremendous positive difference in your personal or professional life. Okay, so take like 2 minutes or more minutes and do it now. So I'll pause now myself for 2 minutes. And if somebody's, of course, anybody that's listening to this, please do this. 2 to 3 things, anything. And don't worry about it if you can or you cannot do it. Just think of a thing. If you actually did it, if you actually somehow managed to do it, it will make a tremendous difference in your life, personal or professional. Okay, let's do it. Okay, so hold on to what you wrote. Hold on to it. We're going to come back to this. Okay, so being proactive in practice means blocking your time, even on busy days, actively on your calendar, for example, to do those things, right? Taking that, we'll come back to this, taking that course that you really need to take, even if you've been hesitant. Learning that kind of language, if you're a coder, for example, that you really are meant to learn. Finding and registering for the workshop that you really need to attend. Being proactive, right? Finding that mentor or coach that actively spends time, or actively spend time with a friend or colleague that elevates you, right? So that's habit 1. Hang in there. We'll come back to it. Habit 2 is about beginning with the end in mind. And we talked about this a bit last time. So an example of that would be to have a mission statement about yourself. For example, about your professional life, personal life. You could have multiple of them. And what you want to create. What is the legacy? When people talk about you, people that you respect, people that you respect and whose opinion matters for you and should matter for you, what do you want them to say about you? And so it's about setting time to think it, to write it, to work at it, to refine it, that mission statement. So that's a very important exercise that you should try to do. And it crystallizes your intentions, your intentionality about what you're doing, and establishes priorities, so you can more easily say no to certain things. And again, it's not just no to others, it's no to yourself too. Sometimes you say, no, I will not be doing that. I want to emphasize, though, that sometimes people think of mission statements as a need to validate your existence, that I'm worthy, that I should have a reason to live, and so it's validating my existence. I want to tell you that that's not how you should think about it. We're all lucky and blessed to exist, to be given this opportunity to be. So it's not about that. So don't set missions to prove that you're worthy to exist. We're lucky and blessed to exist. Take it. Take this great gift that's been given to you. You haven't been asked to validate that, why you exist. But missions are really there perhaps for you to be the best version of yourself, the best that you can be, and to engage with being and beings in the best way possible, right? So it's just think of it that way, and I want to just, because people sometimes think like, why do I, I'm worthless, and let me find a reason. And that day when I find what my mission in life is, that day I'm worthy. No, you're worthy. You already exist. You're here. But try to be the best version that you can be. We talked about this last time, how this is just an example, how in our own lab we set these, and every word I've spent a lot of time with myself and with others in the lab setting this up. These words matter to us. Again, what you write is what you write. We talked about this last time. So you have to come up with your own mission statement. So here's another exercise I want you to do. So there's different ways to do this, but one way to do it is the fact that you imagine, and this might be a little bit of a surprising or shocking exercise, but do it. Imagine that you're entering this commemoration ceremony. Somebody has passed away, and everybody's going to the person who's passed away to pay their respects. And as you walk to that person to pay your respects to that person and to see them, suddenly you see that that person is you, is yourself. And suddenly 5 people get up and they start talking about you, who you were, what you did. And these are 5 people that you trust and whose opinions matter to you. I want you to write these people down. Write a name for each of these 5 people, because you will do an exercise about this later. But right now the exercise is write down on a piece of paper 1 family member, 1 friend, 1 colleague, 1 mentor, and 1 person in your social circle. Just 1 person. Write that down. Imagine that person will get up and talk about you. We're not going to do that exercise, but I just want you to write down the name of these 5 people, because you will do this work later. Okay, so write that down. Don't be shy, write it down. Okay. So what you should do later as an exercise is take time, take like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and write down what they will say about you. Now, not what they will say about you now today, but what you want them to say about you. And this exercise can be very liberating, can be very interesting. You'll see things that you haven't even thought about. It's almost like they're actually talking through you, to you. And so you'll see these are the kind of things that you want, people that you respect, right? Opinion of everyone doesn't necessarily matter, but opinion of people that you think matter, that you trust, and that you interact with, that you should be interacting with, such as family members. What will they say about you? What do you want them to say about you? And do that exercise. You'll see some surprises there. Okay, so build on ultimately. I was asked last time, how do you write a mission statement? These are ways to do it as we're going through these exercises. And ultimately, as you go through those long walks and you do these exercises and you see what are the things that you really want to be known for, those are your deep desired contributions and ways of being that you'll see. And the missions are there. And what are those missions that drive your motivation for the contributions you can make? And you constantly look at it, post it, revise it, share it even with other people. I've already shared our lab's mission with you. So feel free to share it with other people. So I posed this question last time, and I had a mentor who said once he went to see his mentor at Hopkins, who used to be the head of the Department of Radiology at Johns Hopkins, later became the Dr. Elias Zerhouni, later became the head of the NIH, one of the previous heads of the NIH. And he told my mentor, hey, are you doing things right, or are you doing the right things? And he said, what does that even mean? He said, I left the office. I'm like, what on earth was he even talking about? And then he said, I got it. So what does this mean? Can anybody guess in the audience and listeners and attendees. What is the difference between doing things right versus doing the right things? Any guesses that people want to type or mention? Mahir, you could make a guess yours. I mean, you know probably, but what's your take?
I think it's the difference between what and how.
Okay, what does that mean?
So doing the right things means so choosing what to work on, and doing things right is how you do things in a correct way. So
Yeah,
that's my take
yeah,
out of it.
yeah. I think that's a very good take. And so as people, yeah, thinking about these, many of us do things, and we're all good at something, and we do it well. And so the hows we figure it out, and we do it really well. But are we starting with the right things? Are we really doing things that we should be doing? So sometimes people are doing the wrong things right, and that's not good enough. I remember in my early career, when I was at Hopkins, the first 1 or 2 years, I did not have sufficient supervision, as I was talking about this challenge last time too. And at the end of the day, I would just write down all the good things that I did. Oh, I answered 10 emails properly, but I was wasting my time. I was listening a lot to the news. I was distracted. I wasn't focused on the things that I should be doing. And I just did some things right. And I would sort of do this, hey, I don't know, you did well today. But then I realized I'm just celebrating that I did certain things right. But I wasn't doing the right things. So I did certain things right, but I didn't do the right things. So you need to do the right things, pick the right things. And those are the things that are consistent with the mission. And once you do those things, you do them right. And you go at them day after day. So this is another thing that you should definitely do. And we talked about this last time too. So this is where your mission is, where you want to be. This is where your mission is, and you should develop it. But also going through this exercise, coming up with some metrics about how will you actually know when you get there. Some actual metrics. We talked about, sort of understanding where you are in your environment. So that would be strengths and weaknesses of where you are and how things are happening for you, but also in the environment around you, just yourself strengths and weaknesses, or your own group, but also in the environment, the bigger environments, that's opportunities and threats. So sometimes that's referred to as SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses in your own space, so that's here, and opportunities and threats in the environment around you. So as SWOT analysis, you write these down, okay? And finally, when you do all these, this is the big thing. That's the strategic doing. How will you get from here? And these are the to-do lists that will come to you. So we recently did this for one of our clusters in our lab because we have a large number of people. We have different clusters. In one of our clusters, we did this exercise, understanding what are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Where do we want to be? Some metrics, perhaps, right? It's very good. Many people don't do this part, but it's good to do it. And ultimately, after 3 sessions at least, the collectivity of the people in that cluster, in that research cluster of our group, we arrived at a list of about 12, 13, 14 things to do to get there. It was very, very, very eye-opening. So these are some questions you could try to answer in order to arrive at these. Okay, so that was habit 2. So habit 1 was be proactive, believe firmly in the ability of the human being to make a difference, at least in their own life. Number 2, begin with the end in mind, have an objective, envision a future, be a bit of a visionary, see where you want. You cannot always know where you really want to go. And the point is that the missions can also change over time. And that's okay. But what's your best visionary thinking about where you want to be? That deep desire that's talking to you, saying, I want to be there. I want to be this kind of a person. And so you focus on those missions that you're having. And habit number 3 is, okay, a little bit of a, to tell you what habit number 3 is, let's talk about this time management matrix, which many people find useful to deal with. So anything we do can be sort of categorized as urgent or not urgent. You have a deadline, you got to do this. If you don't do this now, bad things will happen. Not urgent is something that can happen tomorrow, and it's fine. You don't have to do it today, and you're not going to die or have a health problem today if you don't do it today, or any problem. Important, non-important, right? So things that are important, things that are not important. So then based on this, it's a bit of an oversimplification of things in life, but it's a good exercise. You have quadrant 1, quadrant 2, 3, and 4, right? So so often I go through and ask people to give me examples of what these things are, and as you think about it, you should for an in-person gathering, this is a very good exercise to go back and forth. But ultimately, examples of things that are urgent are things like crises, health crises, for example. It's obviously important to address a health crisis for you or one of your family members, and it's urgent. Deadlines, if you have a deliverable tomorrow, well, that's urgent. Not urgent are things like building a relationship, building new skill sets, health. If you don't exercise today, you will not, nothing bad will happen to you today. But it's important to exercise in the long term, right? If you don't learn a certain skill that you need to finish your dissertation today, nothing bad is going to happen to you today, but you need to do it for the long-term success. So these are the not urgent but important. Then you have not important but urgent. Sometimes you just have to do certain things. You have to pay the bills. I mean, you could say paying bills is important, but what we mean is immediately important to your mission. Paying the bills is not immediately important to your mission, but you have to do it. Certain emails, certain calls, certain distractions, you have to address them. And then there's the fourth quadrant where we are all experts on this, things that are not even important, they're not urgent. A lot of meetings, distractions, emails, average person, they say checks their email every 5 or 6 minutes, which is shocking, and yet not shocking. All these notifications are on, right? Like why do we have notifications on our phones? Why should we have notifications about everything? Why should everybody have the ability to call me anytime, anywhere I am? Why should my phone be on? Why? But they're on, and we're getting all these distractions, right? So the key I want you to take home is that one of the most important things to success and growth in academia is to focus on quadrant 2. That's one of the key take-home messages and habits I want you to think about. That we don't work on this. We work on these only, typically, and this. We do things that are urgent, that are last minute, because they're due. If you don't do it, something bad will happen. And because we are so deadline addicted, we don't get time to work on these things, and things pile up. And so we're not planning in advance. We're not developing the skills and the tools and the things that we need long term. So we're just always in a state of deliverables, which are due tomorrow. And then what happens is that we sometimes we could have planned long term for this exercise or assignment or things that is due, and therefore moved it to a quadrant 2, but we didn't. So it's last minute, and it puts so much pressure on us that we just lose it and we switch to quadrant 4. We say the hell with everything, I'm going to quadrant 4. So I think if you do quadrant 2 and have many tasks in it, because somebody said the human mind does not need rest, it needs change. So you should have variety of things to do. And it's fun to switch between them, right? So I like to share some quotes here that one of my friends one day said. And this, by the way, habit 3 is put first things first. That's quadrant 2 thinking. The important things, the things that matter long term, that's the first thing you should be doing every day when you're at the peak of your energy. So quadrant 2 thinking is dealing with the problem that you don't want to be caught in the thick of thin things. Or actually, my friend used this expression, death by 1,000 paper cuts. We're so bombarded with these little irrelevant or urgent things that are not important that we're cut every day by these paper cuts, and we don't get time to do the things that matter the most. So I want you to look at the list of items that you wrote, those things that the exercise that we did. Can you look at it and put a quadrant number next to each of them? Which quadrant do they belong to? Are they in quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4? Can you look at it? And you could type what you see. So Mahir, maybe you can share with me what you see.
Oh,
take your
yeah,
time. So, more time.
Okay. Right now, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you see what you see, well, let's give it 15 seconds. Let's give it 15 seconds for everybody to do it. Which quadrant are the items that everybody here has done? If you're watching this video right now or later at home, do this exercise. Go ahead, Ahia. What do you see?
So I see, first of all, I should admit that I'm not actually the best example because I knew about this. You actually trained me over the years, but most of my items are, I mean, pretty much all of them are in quadrant 2.
Yeah.
And one is exercise 3 times a week. I'm not exercising and I'm not dying. So if I could exercise 3 times a week.
You don't have to tell me what the items are if you don't want.
Oh, okay.
I usually don't ask
no,
people
it's fine. I mean, I can share, but if the time is limited, I
Funny
can
you
just
say this because exercise always shows up for me too.
Yeah.
And it always shows up. Something you're not doing enough of, and you should be, and it is definitely quadrant 2. Yeah.
Yeah, and then cutting and sugaring carbs.
Yeah.
Or carbs, I guess I should pronounce.
Yeah.
Learning AI and making tools. That's something that's, you know, I don't need it for my 2 days of work or career, but it's definitely something investing in my future. Searching for mentors and asking them if they would consider being my mentor. That's, again, I think it's in quadrant 2. And increasing my knowledge of human health in general, because I noticed that I had to go and learn after some things happen. And these days with ChatGPT, and learning is just really fast, and it's a shame not to use it.
Sure. So for me too, usually what happens, exercise shows up, a bunch of things show up. A good number of things that show up for me have to do with relationship building, whether it's with my own family members, with my lab members, things that for me, you know, pretty much everything also shows up to be in quadrant 2. And when I ask people about it too, typically most of their items are in quadrant 2. Occasionally you may get something else, but most of them tend to be quadrant 2. And that's not surprising because ultimately the question was things that you're not doing enough of. And usually the reason people don't do enough of something is because it's not urgent. So usually it's because it's not urgent. And then it will make a big difference in your life. So then therefore it's important. So it should, so it tends to show up in quadrant 2. And I think that's the problem. That's a tragedy that we don't spend time every week, every day on these things. And I think exponential growth has to do with this. I remember after that initial 1 or 2 years when I joined Hopkins, I started to block time on my calendar from around 10 to 12 a.m. every day. I said quadrant 2. So that means even if like I used to know this person who would every day show up to my work and say, Arman, we have an emergency. And he would call everything emergency. At some point, I started telling him, Dr. X, I have something very important to do. And he would back off. Because in his mind, when I say something is important, he thinks I'm saying something urgent, but I'm not. I'm saying something important, not urgent. But he thinks the only thing that matters is urgent. I'm like, no, important matters even more. I think that's very, very, very important. And that's the difference between being good and great. Good is linear growth. Great is exponential growth. So good is the enemy of great. That is one of the key reasons. This is a great book, by the way, Good to Great. I think we talked about it last time as one recommended book. And that is one of the key reasons why we have so little that becomes great. We don't have great schools principally because we have good schools. We don't have great government principally because we have good government. Few people attain great lives in large part because it's just so easy to settle for a good life. You do certain things really well, but you're not doing the right things and you're not going at the right thing consistently every day, every week, every month. And again, you could have setbacks. And when setbacks are happening, you as a human being who brings it all together, you're still there during setbacks and you're growing. So yeah, so I think the obstacles to Quadrant 2 is trying to get it all done, pleasing everybody, including yourself. Attention deficit disorder, I don't mean it in a clinical sense. I mean that we are all socially having an attention deficit disorder right now because of so many bombardments and activations and addiction to urgency and addiction to notifications. Because when a notification comes, we're like, yeah, we got to answer that. Well, then turn notifications off. When you're at work, hide your phone. Because even there are studies showing that if somebody's being interviewed and your phone as the interviewer is on the table, not their phone, your phone, that distracts them, let alone their own phone. Right? So hide your phone, turn it off, turn off all these notifications. Why should WhatsApp and Telegram notifications be on? Why? Why should people feel like you have to answer them every second? Even if they get a little bit upset at you, it's okay. It's okay if you're having the right missions in mind. So this is saying um, by Eisenhower, who said, I have two kinds of problems, the urgent and the important. The urgent are not important and the important are never urgent. So he didn't even have he didn't have a quadrant 4, right? He doesn't even think about quadrant 4. It seems as though he doesn't even believe in quadrant 1, but I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration. Sometimes certain things are both urgent and important, like sudden tragedies and health problems. But ultimately, he's saying if something is important, it's never urgent, meaning I don't let it become urgent. If it's important, I'm planning for it in advance. If you have this deadline 2 months from now, this grant due 2 months from now, plan for it now. When I was at my previous institution, I used to submit my grants the very last minute. And I was actually planning for them also the last minute. And at some point, I had a mentor. She told me, what's wrong with you, Armand? Like, why are you going last minute for everything? Get started earlier. And the way she said it and the suffering I was having sort of changed everything. So nowadays, when I have a grant due, everybody around me knows a month and a half in advance that this big grant is coming. I keep telling people, I keep telling myself to put myself in that position of writing those grants, emptying appointments, so lowering people's expectations that they're going to be able to meet me as regularly. And so just actively going at it. Right. And yeah, so think about this quotation. So putting things first. That's habit 3. Put first things first. Quadrant 2 thinking. And so you empty your schedule. You put the mission appointments, things that are consistent with your mission first. This saying looks weird, but it's a good one. You shouldn't prioritize your schedule. You should schedule your priorities. Meaning, don't have a full schedule and say, "Oh, this is important. This is important." No, empty your schedule and start scheduling your priorities. Put them there. And if there is room for other things, and believe me, you will find room for other things, you'll add it. If you start with the big things first, then those non-important things find themselves. Paying the bills and doing this and that and answering this email, they'll find themselves during the day. And so it's telling yourself and others, sorry, but I have something important to do. Some people talk about the 80-20 rule, that 20% of causes generate 80% of results, or even in a company, 20% of the people do 80% of the time. 80% of the value comes from 20% of the effort. So you need to focus on whatever that 20% is. And that will put you ahead a lot. What is your 20%? What are those important 20% things, efforts that if you did, you would really be moving in that direction? There's also things like a resistance that shows up. You want to do great work every day, but you don't feel like it. You show up in the morning, you're like, this is not my day, but you just persevere. And so in the book War of Art, he kind of talks about this thing. He calls it resistance. And he kind of says resistance is this weird thing that is there every day. Oh yeah, here. So it's this weird thing that's invisible, internal, universal, never sleeps. This thing that shows up every day from other places, recruits allies to tell you don't do it. I sometimes tell this story. I remember many years ago when the keto diet was becoming popular. No, it hasn't become popular. It was at the very beginning. I remember my wife was trying it and she was being very good at it. But at some point, I started making fun of her, partly because it was a little bit seemed extreme to me, and maybe a bit of jealousy that I can't do it and she can't do it. Well, whatever the reason was. I became the ally of her resistance to stop her from doing the thing um, that she was doing. So sometimes you see that you're doing great work, and then suddenly allies of your resistance show up and they say, "Oh, why are you doing this? Chill, man. Relax. You're being too serious about your work or your life and whatever." So it shows up from very strange places, even from the dearest people that you love, and there's a daily battle against it. And so the more important call or action is to our soul's evolution, the more resistance we will feel towards pursuing it. And so resistance is um, one of the biggest tools that resistance has. Is a procrastination, which means it says, okay, don't do it today, do it tomorrow. And that's the key for not having exponential growth. You say, we won't do it today, we'll do it tomorrow. Because it's the easiest to rationalize. We don't tell ourselves, I'm never going to write my symphony, my fantastic, the best paper, the Nature, whatever paper. You don't say that. You say, no, I'll do it, but I'm going to write my symphony or my key paper or my Nature paper or whatever paper. I'm just going to start tomorrow. Okay, but I think the point is that this thing shows up. And here's a very interesting line. He says, the following is a list of those activities that most commonly elicit this resistance. Any calling in writing, painting, any creative art, anytime you want to do something big and important and interesting, it shows up. The launching of any entrepreneurial, you want to do a new sort of a entrepreneurial effort. Any diet shows up. Any program of spiritual advancement. Any activity whose aim is tighter abdominals. Any course or program designed to overcome an unwholesome habit, etc., etc. You go through this list. Any act that entails commitment of the heart, the decision to get married, to have a child, to weather a rocky passion relationship, taking up any principle stand in the face of adversity. In other words, any act that rejects immediate gratification in favor of long-term growth, exponential long-term growth, health, and integrity. Or expressed another way, any act that derives from our higher nature instead of our lower, any of these will elicit resistance, right? And then, as I mentioned, it shows up from very strange places. So I'm done. So I want to remind you of some homework that I want to ask you to please do. Do that exercise about what you would like the 5 persons to say about you. Actually do it. Spend 15 minutes, 30 minutes, do it. It's a great exercise. Imagine them talking about you. What do you want them to say about you? Write it down. And actually go and talk to one of them for 30, 60 minutes about their thoughts and your thoughts on what we discussed today. This is one way to help you arrive at your mission. Okay? So that's one. And do this exercise too. And don't just do mission, which is what we have here, but go through this exercise too. Do the SWOT analysis and arrive at specific action items about how to get there. Okay? And that's it. So do these exercises, and you need discipline, and more than that, you need a strong will. You need a strong will and a spirit of openness to get there and to be able to grow. Because ultimately, success depends on growth, and growth is a function of how open you are to change. So are you going to hit the snooze button in the morning, or are you going to get going? Are you going to bounce around or eat the frog. You know the saying that if you eat a live frog first thing in the morning, nothing worse will happen to you. So when you get, okay, I don't feel like working, oh, let's go on Google News and check news for 1 hour before I get started. No, so let's eat that frog and let's go at it, and great things will happen. Am I going to accept the coffee invitation or hit the books? Now, sometimes accepting the coffee invitation is a great thing because that's the relationship building part. So there's no rule about what's good or what's bad here. It ultimately comes down to what's the right thing. Am I going to read the news, write that paper? Another email, answer emails and keep notifications on, or write my code? Am I going to leave on time, or am I going to keep working endlessly? In fact, knowing when you leave work and setting a time for it is always a good thing. And I hope to talk about that in another gathering. Setting an end to your workday is actually a great idea. It also makes you're aware that you're going to end, let's say, at whatever time, and you're going to go back to your personal life. Knowing that makes you more productive at work. Am I going to work out, or am I going to watch Netflix? All right. So ultimately, I wish everybody to the very best, and it's ultimately a battle between superficial personality or deeper character that you're developing. Are you just using some tricks to show people that you're looking at their eyes and that you respect them, whereas it's just a game, or are you actually developing the character of care for others, of doing the right things? Learn to work harder on yourself. My friend's mentor told him this. Learn to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Hard work on your job will earn you a living. Hard work on yourself will earn you a fortune, heaven and earth, and everything in between. And ultimately, it's about taking care of yourself, being attentive to yourself, understanding yourself, going deep into who you are and what things mean for you. So thank you very much.